Hello and welcome to Oxfordshire Uncovered and happy World Fun Fair Month. In today's video we're going to be taking a dive into the history of the amazing St Giles Street Fair in Oxford. We'll start from its small beginnings over 400 years ago and then travel up to the modern spectacle that we see today. So without further ado, welcome to Oxfordshire Uncovered, the history of St Giles Fair. So the story of St Giles Fair actually starts here at St Giles Church. This beautiful church, which is located at the northern end of St Giles Street, was built between 1123 and 1133 and named after St Giles, also known Giles the Hermit. I won't go into St Giles' history in this video as it is a long and complex story. So this church is actually now located in a bustling part of the city, but you need to think back well over 400 years and this church would have been in a field located outside of the city, with the closest gate to the city being at the Saxon Tower, which is now located in Cornmarket Street. But slowly over the years it developed into what we now know as St Giles Street. So fun fact, the actual first record of this street being called St Giles was in 1325. Now even though the church was built way back in 1133, it was not consecrated until 1200. So this is where it gets confusing. Some sources say this is when the fair started as a way to celebrate the church being consecrated. But the main date that the majority of people agree on is the first recorded St Giles Parish Wake in 1624. So here's my theory. There's still feasts on St Giles Day, the 1st of September, up until 1624, when it's first recorded as St Giles Parish Wake. Now I could be very wrong on this, and please tell me in the comments if I am wrong. Regarding the dates for the fair, it is always held on the Monday and Tuesday following the first Sunday after St Giles Day. By the 1720s, the fair had evolved into a children's toy fair where you could buy various wares at a cheap price. The fair started to grow and grow in the early 1800s. It started to become a general kids fun fair with very basic rides like hand-turned and animal-powered roundabouts, as well as fun games and sideshows. In 1865, a major development in the history of fairgrounds occurred at Aylsham Fair in Kent, where the first steam-powered roundabout was revealed. Over the next couple of years, more steam-powered roundabouts were invented, and no doubt were brought here to entertain the crowds. The late 1800s also brought one of the most iconic British fair rides to the scene, the Gallopers. No doubt one of the most iconic rides on the British fun fair circuit. Alongside these glorious steam-powered machines, they would have been joined by sideshows like the Freak Show and boxing booths, as well as fun games and later on bioscope shows, which were an early form of cinema. The fair grew even bigger during the late 1800s and early 1900s. There is a fabulous account from the Oxford Chronicle in 1899 which explains some of the attractions on offer. This is just part of what the article says.
Day's menagerie, containing a collection of 500 animals including lions, tigers, leopards, bears, hyenas, a pack of wild wolves, ostriches, pelicans, vultures and owls, was filled from morning to night. Amongst the other shows were 2 sparring saloons, the Armless Wonder, a man born without hands or arms, who performed all kinds of work with his feet, the Beauty of Adelaide, a woman of immense size, Casper and Tamara, the Mysterious Thought Readers, Carver's Champion Shooters, a man firing at apples and plums on a woman's head, Scott's Circus, Anderton's Conjuring Entertainment, Sidgwick's Menagerie and Waxworks, including Lorenzo, an American lion tamer, the Performing Fleas. The roundabouts were numerous and included the old-fashioned ones turned with a handle to the latest improvements in steam-powered engines. 2 steam switchback railways should be included among the novelties.
It was during this time period that St Giles became a huge attraction, bringing hundreds to the city, which itself caused a lot of problems. There was really one bad incident which was recorded in 1843 when a groom rode a horse through the fair, but it got startled by the noise and actually ran away through the crowd. 20 people were knocked down. It was these kind of incidents that caused some residents to ask for the fair to be cancelled altogether, which is funny because even to this day there is still plenty of residents of Oxford who want this fair gone for good. Some things just never change. So the fair continued to grow throughout the 1900s, and then the 4th of August 1914 it all changed, with the UK declaring war on Germany, kick-starting World War I. So the fair still did run that year, but after 1914, with the war progressing, the fair was cancelled and didn't return till September 1919, the year after the war had ended. So the 20s and 30s brought a huge boom to the fair industry, with brand new technology being brought in to improve and invent new rides. For example, in the 1920s, the Dodgems were invented in the USA, with the first one being brought to the UK in 1928 by Billy Butlin, the founder of Butlins. The ride was a huge success and eventually became a huge piece of the fair circuit. Even to this day, the Dodgems are one of the most popular rides at the fair. Another hugely popular ride that arrived in the 30s was the Speedway, also known as an Arc, or sometimes even the Speedway Arc. This fast-paced ride would send riders around a roundabout with hills consisting of different themed animals or motorbikes for seats. They're extremely popular fair rides, and a lot of them still exist today, but not as arcs. Behind me is Hebborn's Waltzer. This stunning waltzer started its life out as an arc. I've come across this photo of it when it was an arc in the 1960s, owned by the Deakins family. The original arc was built in 1933, making this ride 92 years old. It was converted to a waltzer in the late 80s and early 90s. This is not the only one though. A lot of showmen converted their speedways and arcs to waltzers. It makes sense instead of just buying a brand new ride. Another amazing ride to gain popularity in the 30s was the Moon Rocket, a ride where you sit in a rocket-shaped car that tilts when going around at speed. There is only one of these rides left in the UK that is operational, and it's located in the National Fairground Museum at Stadtholm Country Park. I can highly recommend going there and looking at some of the historical rides on display. It is a really great collection. Now the 30s was a great decade for the funware, with so many exciting new inventions to thrill the general public. Here is another account from poet John Betjeman describing the 1937 fair in great detail.
It is about the biggest fair in England. The whole of St Giles's and even Magdalen Street by Elliston and Cavell's, right up to and beyond the War Memorial, at the meeting of the Woodstock and Banbury roads, is thick with freak shows, roundabouts, cakewalks, the whip and the witching waves. Every sort of fairman finds it worth his while to come to St Giles's. Old roundabouts worked by hand that revolve slow enough to suit the very young or the very old. Aging palmists and sinister, alluring houris excite the wonder and the passions of red-faced ploughmen.
So unfortunately the fun of the 30s came to a grinding halt when once again war broke out on the 3rd of September 1939. The showmen who were travelling to Oxford to set up the fair were actually stopped by the police as they came into the city and were told to return to their yards as the fair had been cancelled. So the Council's Markets and Fair Committee recommended the fair should not be held in 1945, but an amendment opposing this idea was actually carried out at a city council meeting by 24 votes to 17. So the fair then did return that year in September 1945. So I'd just like to remind everyone as well that large amounts of showmen did serve during both wars and contributed massively with the war effort, from raising money to get a Spitfire built, to their showman engines being sent off for war work, and let's never forget those brave showmen that never actually come home that served in both wars. After World War II ended, the steam-powered fun fair started to slowly die off, with a lot of showmen converting to diesel-powered generators mounted on lorries like we see today. I have read that actually a lot of showmen bought some of the surplus military trucks left over from the war and repurposed them for this task. So with a new type of power, new rides came onto the circuit, especially in the late 50s and 60s. Rides like the Twister behind me came onto the scene. Again, the 80s and 90s brought even more new attractions along. For example, rides like the Miami behind me were a staple of the 1990s fairground. The next major milestone of St Giles Fair came in 2020 when the dreaded coronavirus hit, and the fair was cancelled to prevent the spread of the virus. But thankfully a year later the restrictions were lifted and the fun of the fair returned to our streets. It must have been a great relief for the showmen as they were really hit hard during the pandemic, with barely any source of income. So last year actually marked 400 years of St Giles Fair. Unfortunately I missed the opportunity to make this video last year. It would have been actually the perfect time to make it. But I hope I have covered enough history for all those wondering about how this fair grew to what it is today. A lot of people just attend the fair to have fun and go home, and a lot of people don't even think about the history of what they are attending. This fair is truly something special for a lot of the showmen. This marks the start of the back end of the season, which is their busiest time of the year. It is also one of my favourite fairs to attend in Oxfordshire, and it holds many happy memories for me. It also holds so many happy memories for the residents of Oxford. Just while doing this research for the video, just asking about the fair on Facebook, it triggered many conversations of people remembering their childhood memories spent at the fair. And it's so nice to read so many of them. So may this amazing fair continue for another 400 years. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope to see you next time on Oxfordshire Uncovered.